Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Classic Comics live stream. I want to thank those who are watching. Also, want to thank those who will be watching on a rewatch after the fact. Thank you for doing that. So, I'm going to talk about some of the comic book and superhero related events of the past week. And of course, the big subject this week is around midweek, we got the word officially that Henry Cavill is not coming back as Superman. He is done in the role. And it seems that the entire Snyderverse or DCEU or whatever you want to call it is also pretty much finished. Now, let me bring up this article here, and I'm going to go over this. This is from the Hollywood Reporter. Behind the fall of Henry Cavill's Superman. So let's go over this article here. I have not actually read this in depth. I kind of skimmed it earlier. So, nearly 2 months to the day after Henry Cavill declared on Instagram that he was back as Superman, I wanted to make it official, he said in the October 24th clip. The actor was forced to acknowledge that no, he will not be back. After all, as new DC Studios bosses James Gunn and Peter Safran chart a new course for the Man of Steel in a movie to be written by Gunn, which will feature a younger actor in the lead role. I will, after all, not be returning as Superman, Cavill wrote in a new post on Instagram on December 14th. After being told by the studio to announce my return back on October prior to their hire, this news isn't the easiest, but that's life. The changing of the guard is something that happens. I respect that. James and Peter have a universe to build. The sunsetting of Cavill's time as Superman was the clearest indication yet that Gunn and Safran are mounting a substantial overhaul of DC, a reboot that will cut significant, if not most, ties to the previous regimes that handled DC movies for Warner Brothers. Cavill also shot a cameo in The Flash, one of four DC movies set to release in 2023, but sources say that cameo, along with that of Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, is now being cut given that the studio chose to not go forward with director Patty Jenkinson's version of Wonder Woman 3. Cavill found himself in a confluence of different headwinds at the studio. Dwayne Johnson pushed for his return via the much hyped cameo in Black Adam and a potential linchpin for Johnson's own DC Universe franchise. But Black Adam has grossed 389 million worldwide. Its soft performance calling into question Johnson's much touted plans for a sequel and an eventual Adam versus Superman movie even before Gunn's decision. The studio had its own plan as new film co-chiefs Michael DeLuca and Pan Abdi wanted to make a Man of Steel sequel, having Peaky Blinders creator Stephen Knight to write the treatment. Classic character Brainiac was to have been the villain of that piece, a source says. Now, I haven't seen that script, of course, so I have no idea, but Peaky Blinders isn't exactly the sort of material that I think of that would have someone writing a good Superman movie. A good Batman movie, I could see that. But that doesn't make me think right off that, oh, that's a great choice to write a Superman movie. In the end, he was a pawn of Dwayne's failed attempt to control a piece of DC, one insider observes. Cavill, sources say, did not have a deal in place to return as Superman, only a verbal agreement that the studio would develop future projects. So there you go. He was paid $250,000 each for his cameos. The actor in recent years had a resurgence thanks to starring in Netflix's popular fantasy series The Witcher, which saw him earning $1 million per episode. Cavill left the show this fall, although it's unclear if the promise of more Superman appearances were behind his exit. It's hard to believe that didn't play some kind of role in it. Gunn and Safran are well aware of the sensitivities behind axing the popular Justice League cast by Zack Snyder, as well as the sensitivities of parting ways with high profile and popular talent. Foregoing a call to agents or producers, the executives met with Cavill to discuss their plans and seemed to indicate a potential new role down the road. The pair have also made overtures to Ben Affleck, aka Batman, asking him to direct a DC film for them, while Jason Momoa, who may be done as Aquaman, has met with the duo as well, possibly about playing a new role. Cavill has already lined up another franchise, Warhammer 40,000, at Amazon. As for Gunn, he responded to a fan who accused Warner Brothers and DC of stringing Cavill along to goose Black Adam's opening weekend. Said Gunn in a comment on Instagram this week, "Everything with Black Adam happened before I was around." So keeping Cavill around, in a new role. I mean, I'm not opposed to that, but I'm kind of puzzled about what role would you have him play? I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, honestly, is to cast him as Jor-El in a new Superman movie. That would seem like the most obvious thing. You could have Cavill play, Jor-El. You could have Gal Gadot play Wonder Woman's mother, Queen Hippolyta. You could have Ben Affleck play Thomas Wayne, and we can see him get shot again. Now let's look over at this article about the Warhammer series. So, Henry Cavill's next play, Warhammer 40,000 series for Amazon. The streaming giant is in the process of closing the rights to the miniature war game. Henry Cavill may not be donning a red cape. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I need to share the screen, don't I? So let me do that. There it is. Okay. Let me bring this up. Okay. So Henry Cavill's next play, Warhammer 40,000 series for Amazon. The streaming giant is in the process of closing the rights to the miniature war game. Henry Cavill may not be donning a red cape, but he does have a cool new gig. The actor who Wednesday officially hung up his Man of Steel cape, but he does. But after Warner Brothers and let me start over. The actor who Wednesday officially hung up his Man of Steel cape after Warner Brothers announced it is going in a new Superman direction, thanks to DC studio heads James Gunn and Peter Safran, is attached to star in and executive produce a series adaptation of Warhammer 40,000, the popular science fiction fantasy war game that is set up at Amazon. Amazon has secured the rights to the game, produced by Workshop, after months of negotiations and fending off rival companies that also sought the rights. This is envisioned as a potential film and TV play. No writers or showrunners are attached. Vertigo Entertainment's Roy Lee and Natalie Fiscuso teamed with Cavill to secure the rights and deliver it to Amazon. Vertigo will executive produce with Cavill and GAW's Andy Smiley and Max Bottrell, along with Amazon Studios. It's great news, and we're absolutely thrilled. We're working with a fantastic triumvirate in Henry, Vertigo, and Amazon. Henry's well known love for Warhammer 40K and his passion as a world builder and storyteller will serve us well in the coming years. Finally, Warhammer will make it to the screen as the fans have hoped and as they deserved. Exciting times, said Andy Smiley, creative director for GAW. Warhammer is akin to a Dungeons and Dragons. I love how they just say that. Akin to a Dungeons and Dragons. You could elaborate a little more. So it's a role playing game. It originated as a role playing game, tabletop role playing game. Dice are involved in the playing, but also features intricate miniatures that players can place and move around a model constructed battlefield or world. Games Workshop in the 1980s made miniatures for D&D and launched the game in 1987. It has grown to become the most popular miniature war game in the world and spawned many imitators. The game's setting is 40,000 years into the future where things are dark indeed. Human civilization has stopped progressing and is in an unending war with aliens and magical beings, with gods and demons featuring or figuring into a theological class system. The humans make up the Imperium of Man, who are militaristic. A race of skeleton like androids are known as the Necron. There is an elvish race known as Eldari, as well as orcs. Tyranid are nasty aliens, and the Tau is a blue skinned alien race that may offer some hope. Cavill is known to be a Warhammer fan and paints figures. Because the project is in such early stages, to reiterate, Amazon has yet to close the deal. Huh, okay. This is not the next gig for Cavill, who recently announced he was exiting his lead role in Netflix's The Witcher. But it is an ambitious move for Amazon and could deliver a show that is epic in scale as it combines the big genre elements of sci fi and fantasy, as well as a host of human and non human characters. I have loved Warhammer since I was a boy, making this moment truly special for me. The opportunity to shepherd this cinematic universe from its inception is quite the honor and the responsibility, said Cavill. I couldn't be more grateful for all the hard work put in by Vertigo, Amazon Studios, and Games Workshop to make this happen. One step closer to making a nigh on lifelong dream come true. And then, okay, so they have an update. So, updated to add quotes and to note that Amazon has officially secured the rights. Okay. Um, so, I mean, I guess that's going to be coming for him, and that's good to hear. And it's something that apparently he is really into and that he really likes. I know 40K is really popular. I played the original tabletop role playing game back in like the late 80s, early 90s a couple of times, and it was okay. But I was just, already played D&D and was just like, "Well, I don't really need to play this because I didn't need it." But it's cool that he's getting a follow-up project and, he's landing on his feet and doing something that he really likes. And like I say, I'm glad that's happening for him. He's really just it's just gotten such a raw deal from DC and from Warner Brothers, and they've just kind of repeatedly jerked the rug out from under the guy. So it's nice to see him landing on his feet and moving on to something positive. Now, I had another article. This is the one. So we know Warner Brothers is going to be moving on without Cavill and doing a new Superman film. Now, a bit of information on that has come out. So I have another article from the Hollywood Reporter here that I wanted to go over as well. So James Gunn is writing this new Superman movie. The project will focus on the hero in his younger days and will star an actor other than Henry Cavill. James Gunn is making his first big move at DC and will pen a Superman movie. The project will focus on the younger years of the hero, and thus he will be played by a new actor rather than Superman veteran Henry Cavill. Gunn and his DC Studios co-chair and co-CEO Peter Safran recently met with Cavill to share the news and to discuss ideas for potentially collaborating in the future on something else, perhaps a different role. And again, what would he play? Like I say, the obvious thing that comes to mind to me right off is that he plays Jor-El, like in flashbacks or something like that. I don't know if Henry would be interested in doing that as a cameo. He might feel like that's not worth his time. But I don't know if it was good enough for Brando. I guess it's good enough for him. Aside from that, what could he play? I mean, there are a bunch of characters he could potentially play, but I don't know. One thing that keeps coming to my mind that I think would be interesting to see him play is Doc Strong, and that's a character that's actually was originally an Image and Wildstorm character that was created by Alan Moore. Tom Strong, actually, it's Tom Strong, and the character was created. He's kind of clearly inspired by, I would compare him to Doc Savage. He's got this very kind of pulpy sort of feel to him. He's, one of those sort of characters. He's developed his body to the physical peak, and he's like a century old because he lives on this island where there's a kind of plant that keeps you young. You know, you can make like this serum that keeps you young. And then, of course, he's also a scientific genius. And his adventures had a very retro feel to it. And eventually, Jim Lee sold the Wildstorm characters to DC. So DC owns the character, and he has made a few appearances. So I would like to see him play that actually, but that's such an obscure character. I doubt they have any plans to use it. Peter and I have a DC slate ready to go, which we couldn't be more over the moon about. We'll be able to share some exciting information about our first projects at the beginning of the new year, Gunn wrote on Twitter on Wednesday. Among those on the slate is Superman. In the initial stages, our story will focus on an earlier part of Superman's life, so the character will not be played by Henry Cavill. But we just had a great meeting with Henry, and we're big fans, and we talked about a number of exciting possibilities to work together in the future. Though this Superman will be on the younger side, he won't be living in Smallville, but rather will be Daily Planet reporter Clark Kent, according to insiders. This news may be a surprise to fans who expected Cavill to return as Superman in the near future. Cavill appeared in a post-credits sequence in Black Adam released in October. Yeah, we know all this. And the Monday after the film opened, he posted a message on Instagram, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we know all that. Cavill, who announced his departure from the Netflix series The Witcher following his return as Superman, reflected on the change in an Instagram post, writing, I will, after all, not be returning as Superman after having been told by the studio to announce my return. I mean, yeah, okay, I've covered all this. Over his near decades since playing Superman, Cavill has become a fan favorite actor, first appearing in 2013's Man of Steel and reprising the role in Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice and Justice League. Since assuming their new roles November 1st, Gunn and Safran have been taking meetings with other key players in the DC universe. In addition to Cavill, they have recently met with Batman actor Ben Affleck to discuss the possibility of him directing for them in the future, according to sources familiar with the conversation. No deal is in place for Affleck to helm a DC feature at this stage. They also had conversations with filmmaker Patty Jenkins, who no longer will be moving forward with a third Wonder Woman film. Warner's has been developing a Black Superman film written by Ta-Nehisi Coates and produced by J.J. Abrams, and Gunn's new movie is said to not have an impact on that project, with Coates still working on the script. Okay, that was announced like 2 years ago. He's still writing it? Wonders has long wanted Gunn to tackle a Superman movie. In 2018, after Gunn's departure, or in 2018, after Gunn departed Marvel Studios for DC when he was temporarily fired from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, then Warner Brothers studio boss Toby Emmerich pushed for Gunn to take on Superman. Gunn opted to write and direct The Suicide Squad instead. That movie also paved the way for Peacemaker, the HBO Max spinoff starring John Cena, and gave Gunn a taste of world building in the DC universe. Still, Superman has long been a favorite for Gunn, who has been thinking about this new movie since his early days at DC 4 years ago. Over the weekend, Gunn marked the anniversary of the 1978 film by Richard Donner, sharing the poster and reminiscing about seeing it in theaters in Missouri as a child. Wrote the filmmaker and exec, I loved it, and it rivaled Star Wars for me, and the score blew my mind. Yeah, well, I think you could say that for a lot of people at that time. So I've heard, and I don't know how much of it is true, but I remember hearing or seeing in some forum somewhere that the part of the reason this happened, and the reason they're moving on from the DCEU and Snyderverse is that, as the article noted, they had approached Ben Affleck about directing, and I guess he then backed out and wanted more money. And apparently that ticked off Zaslav. And that, along with the relative failure of Black Adam, is kind of what prompted Zaslav to say, let's just move on from this. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've heard. And the whole issue of, oh, we're going to have Superman He's young, he's not Superman yet, he's just starting out. I mean, we've seen that in Smallville. That's what we got in Man of Steel, basically. He's not Superman yet, and, he's still learning to be Superman, and I really don't like that because it's just become kind of this crutch that the writers use in these situations to take this iconic character, whether it's Superman or whoever, and write them differently and say, "Oh, well, they're not the Superman you know yet. They're not the character you know that yet. So it's okay for them to act completely out of character." You know, like that's how they justified Spock on Star Trek Discovery, where they were writing him, where he was not behaving like Spock at all. Oh, well, he's still young. He's not the Spock you know yet. And I've gotten tired of that excuse. So I I mean, Gunn's a talented guy, but I'm not enthused about that right off, to be honest. It remains to be seen, maybe it'll be good. And I do hope that he's not going to bring, honestly, if he's writing it, it's one thing. If he's directing it, that's another. I do hope they will get someone else to direct, but the fact that he's writing it himself kind of leads me to think he will. And like Gunn's, like I say, he's talented, and I loved Guardians of the Galaxy, loved the first one. It's probably maybe my favorite film of the last decade. That or the Avengers, one or the other, the first Avengers. But the approach you take with a Guardians of the Galaxy or with the Suicide Squad is not the same approach you're going to be taking with Superman, or at least it shouldn't be. And that's kind of my concern is he's going to take this same kind of kind of goofy, quirky, kind of like not taking anything really seriously approach with Superman, and that's not the right approach for that character. There are DC characters I would really like to see him do. There have been rumors of Lobo, and on the surface, at first blush, I think he'd be good for Lobo. But the more I think about it, honestly, in the current Hollywood environment, does anyone really think we're going to get a proper Lobo? I can't believe they'll do that. He's like the embodiment of, toxic masculinity, quote unquote. And I find it hard to believe that if we got a Lobo movie, it would really be a proper Lobo. He would be neutered. He would be neutered in some way. Other characters, I think he'd be great for Ambush Bug. Myself, I'd love to see him do Ambush Bug, but that's such an obscure character. Or Plastic Man. He'd do a great Plastic Man. I'd love to see that. But I mean, Superman, mm, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that. But we'll just have to cross our fingers and hope for the best now, because this is the way they're going, and it doesn't look like they're going to be stopping anytime soon. Now, let me switch articles again here, because of course there's some other news related to this. Now, Cavill and I guess Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot, they made cameos for the Flash movie, and I think maybe some for the Aquaman movie too. And of course, it apparently looks like those have been cut out, so that's all been for nothing. Uh, so let's take a look at this one. James Gunn's reboot for the DCU continues with the removal of both Henry Cavill and Gal Gadot from the upcoming Flash, where they had cameos. The DCU's reboot plan continues as Henry Cavill's and Gal Gadot's cameos from the upcoming The Flash have reportedly been cut. The Flash will star Ezra Miller once more in the role of the fastest man alive, with their Barry Allen traversing DC's multiverse and meeting different versions of heroes, such as Sasha Calle's Supergirl and returning Michael Keaton as Batman. According to THR, both Henry Cavill and Gal Gadot have been removed from The Flash. Cavill's Superman exit has been the focal point of social media discussion since James Gunn announced his Superman reboot, which will star a younger actor in the role. Cavill's cameo being cut from The Flash was rumored prior to Gunn's announcement, given its absence from a recent test screening for the movie. Gadot's case is a little different, as it was also revealed that DC Studios has chosen not to go forward with director Patty Jenkinson's vision for Wonder Woman 3. Jenkinson's exit is the reason for Godot being cut from The Flash, but there's no word yet if the actress will be leaving the DCU altogether. Check out THR's full quote below. And as I said, if they're going to reboot Wonder Woman, have her play Hippolyta, Wonder Woman's mother. I think that would be good. And yeah, so the Hollywood Reporter's full quote below. Cavill also shot a cameo in The Flash, one of four DC movies set to release in 2023, but sources say that that cameo, along with that of Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, is now being cut given that the studio chose not to go forward with director Patty Jenkinson's version of Wonder Woman 3. What man, what a trash fire this Flash movie has been. That and Aquaman, they're both, I mean, how many reshoots have they done on these movies? It's something like, I mean, The Flash has got to be on at least its fourth round of reshoots, probably. I don't even know anymore. After Cavill's firing and his cameo being cut from The Flash alongside Gadot, the DC future of their characters is in flux. Gunn's aiming for a DCU reboot that will allow the franchise to bloom and reach the full potential the comics present. That the comics present. Due to that, there's a very decent chance that the entire cast of the DCEU's Justice League will be leaving the universe for good. Cavill is only the most recent departure, but Ray Fisher's series of public confrontations with DC parent company Warner Brothers Discovery sealed his fate as Cyborg a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, the relationship that Warner Brothers has had with the Justice League cast, I mean, it's what a mess. Ben Affleck also appeared to have left the role of Batman behind after pulling out from the solo movie he was set to write, direct, and star in. Surprisingly, Affleck decided to return as Batman, signing back on for The Flash and Aquaman 2. But given Wonder Woman and Superman being cut from The Flash, there's a real possibility that Affleck's Batman doesn't end up back on screen. Now, DC head Gunn has talked about meeting with Affleck to find him a project to direct, so at least there's a chance Affleck will still be involved in some form with the new TCU, maybe even directing a new Batman movie. That would be interesting, having him direct Batman. And like I said, he could he could play Thomas Wayne. We can see Thomas Wayne get murdered again. That leaves Miller, Jason Momoa, and Gadot standing, with the latter being most at risk following the collapse of Wonder Woman 3 and her cameo being cut from The Flash. Miller's most likely not returning after the release of The Flash. Yeah, most likely. The actor's been involved in a series of controversies over the last couple of years that already led to calls for The Flash to be recast before Gunn and Peter Safran became DC Studio CEOs, which doesn't bode well for Miller. Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, how could you continue with that guy? Finally, rumors have recently circulated about Gunn wanting to keep Momoa in the new DCU, albeit with a different role that's possibly the anti hero Lobo. In the end, every new report suggests a full reboot of the Justice League is what's in store for the new DCU, with The Flash serving as the swan song for the original DCU. So, yeah, man, I tell you, the DCU, the Snyderverse, whatever you want to call it, wow, what a mess. It's just one one mess. It lurched from one mess to another, just one disaster to another. Now, as far as Cavill goes, of course, he had been doing The Witcher, and he recently left The Witcher publicly, saying he was leaving the show. And of course, there has been speculation that he left because, the show had basically gone the woke feminist route, marginalizing his character, Geralt, sidelining him, basically making him a supporting character and focusing on the females, which is, over the last 5, 6 years, that's just basically become standard operating procedure in Hollywood. We saw it with, well, honestly, the first time I remember it was in Mad Max Fury Road. But then we saw it in The Last Jedi with Luke, and we've just seen it multiple times. Uh, Most recently, we've had it with some of these DC streaming shows where that's like their whole trick. They have a show named after a male character, and then it turns out the show's really more about this female character instead. Like Moon Knight was really the origin story of I forget the character's name now. I don't even remember. Hawkeye was really more about Kate Bishop. Loki was really more about that female version of Loki, Sylvie or whatever the hell her name was, and so on. This indie movie that's coming out, same thing, same crap. It's they use Indiana Jones, his name, and Harrison Ford to sell this thing, but then it's basically going to be about this female character basically taking his place. Although apparently there are now rumors that there are going to be reshoots and the ending's going to be changed. We can only hope. So this happening on The Witcher, it's not a surprise at all. And apparently Henry didn't like this, so he left the show. At least that's generally assumed to be the reason. And now apparently someone allegedly connected with the show has leaked some information. And this has kind of hit the web, I guess, today or maybe late yesterday. So let me go ahead and bring up this information. So this is on the site Fandom Wire. So Henry Cavill accused of toxic behavior on the Witcher set. A supposedly leaked transcript from an episode of Spotify's Do You podcast has grabbed the online crowd's attention due to its blasting criticisms about Henry Cavill and his time on Netflix's The Witcher sets. The transcript, which cites no credible sources and is worded more like a fan fiction than an official report, states, I recently got this message and somebody was like, "Do you want to know what's really went down?" And I was like, "Sure." So let me just read it. It says, "At the beginning of the show, Henry was good to work with. A lot of unusual demands that made people feel like he wasn't really a team player, but that's not unusual for a big star. Though in TV, it truly usually doesn't happen until the second season. But in season 2 and 3, something shifted and he became really impossible for women to work with, which is always a big problem. But even worse here because the showrunner is a woman. He would try to overrule her and try to get changes made last minute across the board without her knowledge, which, if you know anything about show running, is completely fucked. The showrunner has to sign off on every minuscule detail down to the buttons on a costume. Female writers and directors were suddenly completely ignored, unable to do their jobs. Every department head was complaining. He started making comments. It wasn't a sexual thing. He wasn't grabbing anyone or being lewd, but it was disrespectful and toxic all the same. He's deeply addicted to video games to the point where it was like working with any other addict. He was distracted. He was late. He was obsessive. And a lot of people think that the misogyny came from the gamer world. Video game bro language is not how you talk to coworkers. And he wouldn't stop. Somehow, someone on the show compared it to watching someone get brainwashed by QAnon. Like his whole personality shifted. Eventually, his disrespect escalated. He would rewrite scenes without even alerting the other actors in the scenes until it was time to shoot. He decided that he didn't want any romantic scenes at all, no kissing, no shirtless scenes, etc. He wanted complete control of storylines, but really had no idea of the limitations of TV, structure, budget, etc. He formed a weird alliance with one writer who was also a gamer, who eventually got fired after multiple HR complaints were made. And after that writer left, Henry did anything he could to hold up production and cause problems. Eventually, top brass at Netflix was tired of him costing them money with delays in HR investigations, and the showrunner was asked to construct a potential exit for him. Netflix reached out to him personally, and he was given one final warning and violated that warning with an email he sent to the entire writing staff right after that meeting. That was it. Upsetting. The upsetting aspect of the entire story rests on the fact that the allegations were made by an apparent someone who went on to monologue a well articulated scathing criticism against the actor who has been nothing short of Shakespearean in his speeches, which directly calls questions to what video game bro language supposedly means in this context. Whatever purposes whatever purpose the allegations levied against Cavill were expected to serve, and has drawn more ridicule than concern on the people's part. Moreover, it is highly unlikely that obsessive behavior on the actor's part would arise from his addiction to video games, considering Cavill has been blatantly transparent in the past about his interests are based on high fantasy epic novels and miniature war game series, not the kind that usually warrants misogyny and toxic behavior in the workplace. Um, yeah, there's more. If there's one aspect that the Twitter mob is qualified to deliver, it is the ubiquitous sarcasm and whip smart counterattacks against anything that borders on ridiculous. The leaked transcript has brought out the best and the brightest among the crowd who have risen to the occasion to counter the allegations made against Henry Cavill and his alleged toxic behavior on the set of The Witcher. And so a bunch of tweets here. Dumois is known for hating every male celebrity, so I wouldn't be surprised if they exaggerated this. Take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, that's kind of my feeling on this is that, it is known that he was not thrilled with the changes they were making because they were basically getting away from the source material, away from the canon of the lore, however you want to decide it. And he wasn't thrilled with that. And I'm guessing what they're doing is they're taking maybe some disagreements or disputes he had and blowing them out of proportion and making it like he was this raging misogynist, menace on set or something like that. Because in the mind of some of these feminists, basically if you have any disagreement with them or if you question them in any way or dissent in any way, you're a misogynist and a sexist or whatever. And you know they're just going to make that assumption. And let's see what else. Reads like an upset showrunner who didn't like the fact that Cavill was so vocal about his dislike of the changes in direction of the show and how it wasn't following the source material right. This person says, "What's on Immortals? But a nice, more down to earth person on set. Henry is absolutely aces and a joy to work with. I can only speak to that experience, and it was 2010. But again, he was amazing, unassuming, and an overall great guy." This one, I'm ready and willing to believe this, except what's the accusation? There's no details here. He made unusual demands, such as he started making comments like he rewrote scenes. Which one? He held up production. How? Every department head was complaining about what? Yeah, I mean, this is really all vague general stuff. I think it's just people trying to pile on him. I suspect that's just my take on it. You can make your own decisions. Henry didn't like it as a fan of The Witcher, certainly holding up production and trying to rewrite things behind people's backs. That's valid criticism, but with no excuse as an actor. But this blurb is an attempted character assassination with no proof. As for the actor himself, there has been no official statement from him refuting these claims. The online crowd doesn't expect Henry Cavill to justify or defend himself against the allegations, since yet again it is all hearsay. With no credibility attached to the transcript and no arguments backing up the half cooked allegations, it would be surprising if the report goes far without being questioned about its authenticity. Yeah, it does have the feel of fanfic to it. So who knows? Maybe there is something to it, but I'm not putting much stock in this myself. And I'm not guessing that a whole lot of people will. Now, with him off the show, there's actually been movements to get him reinstated on The Witcher. And there's actually a petition at change.org to bring him back to the show. Now, I don't really think this is going to go anywhere, but let's check in on it and see where they're at. So I guess at 300,000 signatures, this petition becomes one of the top signed on change.org. And they've got, what have they got here? 287,919, and they want to get to 300,000. So, I mean, they're getting there. They need about what, another 12, a little over 12,000. So Netflix, you must keep Henry Cavill as The Witcher and replace the writers instead. Yeah, that would be nice. Uh, Andrei Sapkowski, I believe that's the creator of The Witcher, right? Said about Henry Cavill, I was more than happy with Henry Cavill's appearance as The Witcher. He's a real professional, just as Viggo Mortensen gave his face to Aragorn, so Henry gave his to Geralt, and so and it shall be forever so. Henry isn't leaving The Witcher because of Superman. Netflix executives have once again made a grave decision about delivering for their fans. The reason why The Witcher is such a popular show is the fans' love of the source material of books and games that are hated by and have actively been mocked by the writers and showrunner. Henry Cavill is one of those fans, and he knows all of it inside out and wanted to stay true to Sapkowski's world, which is why Netflix wants to replace him. Let us show them in pure numbers and thus lost money because that's all they really care about. That none of us Witcher fans will stand with them and will abandon the show and potentially our subscriptions after The Witcher season 3 is concluded. Netflix can only exist because all of us pay them monthly to produce content that is entertaining for us. Unfortunately, all public information points toward a production team making decisions that are completely opposite to the fans, our interests. We already had to suffer through the disaster that was the end of Game of Thrones. Netflix don't repeat the same mistake of holding on to writers and showrunners that believe themselves to be superior to the actual creator of the stories that made them successful. Yeah, and like I say, this is just par for the course in Hollywood now. Uh, they take these properties that were created by men that feature male characters and basically hand them over to uh, women who are very feminist, very left wing, and they proceed to do their best to wreck them and marginalize the male characters and bring other female characters to the forefront. So, unfortunately, that is nothing new. I personally not a Witcher fan. I haven't read any of the books or any of the other stuff, and I haven't watched the show because I don't have Netflix. But, yeah, I mean, I certainly have seen that happen with other franchises I love, so I get what they're going through. And I doubt this is really gonna make a dent in anything or make any change, but I wish them the best of luck. Okay, now, before I finish this live stream out, I'm gonna pay another visit to, the Super Team Family blog, and let me bring that up. And we'll just take a look at that before we finish this out here. So, as I've stated in previous live streams, so this is a blog, and I don't know the guy's name, but he created this blog around 2010, and he photoshops fake covers for comics, but specifically for comic book team ups, as he says, comic book team ups that never happened but should have. So, we're going to look at another batch of these here. So, first of all, Batman and Blade. And I don't recognize these covers or where this is from. This does look like maybe a Neil Adams Batman, so I'm guessing that's like a 70s cover, and that Blade is probably from the 2000s sometime. If the Daywalker refuses, he dies instead. That would be a cool team up, the two of them, Batman and Blade. Something I'd like to see. Okay, next one is Batman and Mira. Mira, of course, is Aquaman's wife. And well, we got the gravestone of Batman here, and it's my Batman is dead. It's my fault. So I do remember these elements. Batman died. So this is from a cover of Batman from the late 70s. And in the original cover, the Batman tombstone is kind of in the middle. And then you had an open grave in front of it, and some of his villains like Joker, Riddler, Penguin, Catwoman, Two Face, and some others were sort of standing over the grave, sort of like commemorating his death or something like that. I forget the actual issue. And then this mirror here, this is from actually a cover of Aquaman, and this torn cape and cowl, that's from another cover that's sort of been photoshopped in there. But in the original cover of Aquaman, it was right after Aquaman's son had died. I believe it was the following issue, and she was accusing Aquaman of getting their son killed. That's what that was about. And that's Jim Aparo doing the art on Mira there. Then we've got Batman and Mogo. Mogo, of course, is the planet Green Lantern, who is a sentient planet. Back off, GL. This alien's my prisoner. No Batman. He's going to face the Guardian's justice. So I don't know what these covers these are from right off. A Battle in the Stars, The Prize, The Fugitive from Two Worlds. So that would be certainly an interesting team up. Okay, Batman and Invincible. That would be an interesting pairing, especially considering Invincible is not opposed to killing at all. And I don't recognize where these figures come from the original covers. Okay, now here's a team up I'd really like to see: Batman and Moon Knight. And that would be cool because Moon Knight is basically a Batman knockoff. At least that's what he started out as originally. Now, you can make an argument that his character has kind of grown and developed enough that he's kind of grown beyond that, and he's not just a Batman knockoff anymore. But certainly in his early days, that is what he was. If you can't stand the heat, don't mess with the White Dragon. So the White Dragon is actually, I believe he's a Spider-Man villain, kind of a low-level Spider-Man villain. And I believe this is a Spider-Man cover originally, maybe for Marvel Team Up. I'm not sure. And I don't recognize where these figures come from. But yeah, that is a Batman and Moon Knight fighting White Dragon. That would be a cool story. I'd really like to see that. Okay, Batman and Moon Dragon. And I do kind of recognize this cover. This actually is from an issue of Marvel 2 in 1. And the cover artist was George Perez. So he drew Moon Dragon and the background and everything. Now, originally, this would have been The Thing. The Thing was up here in the foreground, I think. And of course, he's been photoshopped out and replaced with Batman. I don't recognize right off which cover that Batman comes from. But him meeting Moondragon would certainly be an interesting pairing. Moondragon's kind of an obscure character. She's worked with the Avengers, also with the Defenders. Interesting note: Moondragon is actually in the comics. She's actually the daughter of Drax the Destroyer. He was her father. Although in the movies they've kind of they changed that. They didn't do it that way. Okay, Batman and Morbius. So, Holy Morbid time, Batman. So again, this would be kind of a cool pairing. Both of them having that kind of bat vampire theme to them. And I'm trying to remember. This is, I believe, a Brave and the Bold cover, but obviously the original person has been photoshopped out and Morbius put in. I believe that's a Gil Kane figure of Morbius. I don't remember the specific cover of Spider-Man that comes from though, but that would definitely be a cool team up. Yeah, Derpy 501, it's Morbid time. Exactly. Okay, what else have we got here? Thank you for stopping by, Derpy. I appreciate it. Okay, Batman and the Dazzler. So definitely a creative team up. And I don't remember. This looks like a Silver Age cover. This has got to be some Silver Age cover with Batman. He's got the flowers and the candy. And I'm assuming there was a different figure here, maybe Catwoman or somebody. And Robin's trying to get him to answer the bat signal. And that Dazzler, that figure of Dazzler, that actually comes, I believe, from the the official official handbook of the Marvel Universe, which was published back in the 80s. This is the figure from her entry of that. And I'm not sure who the artist is here. If this is really Silver Age cover, then this may be like Dick Sprang, I think might be the artist. No, no, that's not Dick Sprang. I'm not sure. So Derpy says, "What? I'm just here because I looked up James Gunn. You were live, and here I am. Yeah, here you are, man. Here we both are. Well, thank you for stopping by, nonetheless. I've actually already talked about James Gunn, by the way. I should let you know, and I'm kind of wrapping up here. So Batman and Agents of Atlas. Okay, so this is kind of cool, and this is a cover of Agents of Atlas from Marvel. And then they've added Batman in here, obviously. So the Agents of Atlas characters are kind of interesting. So the the publisher of Marvel Comics, of course, they weren't originally named Marvel Comics. They had a different name. I'm sorry, Derpy. I didn't mean to make you sad, but I thought you should know so you're not just sitting around waiting. Maybe if you want to maybe look for something. But again, this live stream will be available for rewatch if you want to watch it. The James Gunn stuff is kind of early in the live stream, and it's only going to be about an hour long. But these Agents of Atlas characters, so they were published. The publisher of Marvel Comics, they published what are they? National Publications, I think, is what they were originally called. And they published their first comic book series was called Marvel Comics, which is where Marvel kind of originates from. But then they stopped publishing superheroes like most comic book publishers did as World War II was winding down. Now, in the 1950s, they kind of made an attempt to revive a superhero line. So they created a new comic book company called Atlas Comics, and they published a handful of characters. It didn't last very long and died pretty quick. And the characters that they published were these Agents of Atlas characters. Now, these characters were later revived, like decades later, by Marvel and sort of folded into the Marvel universe. The idea being that they kind of were predecessors of the Avengers and that sort of thing. So Derpy says, "Can you go for another 10, 15 to because you seem like a DC fan that wasn't fan of Snyder's work, but it's okay." And hello, Lord Thoth. Thanks for stopping by. 15 because you seem like I mean, yeah, I can go for another 15 minutes. Like I say, I'll just cycle through these covers. And yeah, so Lord Thoth, I've already done most of my live stream. I'm just kind of going through some more of these covers. And I think you've seen me do these before, I think, but they're just kind of fictional sort of Photoshop covers, and I just kind of give my thoughts on them. And these Agents of Atlas characters, they were given their own series, and there's, of course, a classic '50s character is this ape man. I forget his name, and then there's this robot, Namora, or is it Namorita? And she's, of course, a cousin to Namor, the Submariner. Johnny Cho, who was a civilian kind of, though eventually he became an agent of Shield. Venus, and this character who was originally Marvel Boy, although they changed his name to kind of the awkward name of the Uranian, which is kind of a weird name to give somebody. So what else we got here? Okay, so Batman and Mr. Fantastic. And I actually have this issue of Brave and the Bold. So and I forget the issue. Is it 189? I guess that's it. But the original cover, it was Batman, and there's a DC character. She's kind of obscure called Thorn, and she's a female kind of vigilante. And she was the person that Batman was teaming up with in this. This was a multi-part story, like a two-parter. And she was originally tied here to this other stake. They've taken her out and put in Mr. Fantastic. And this is a Mr. Fantastic image by John Byrne, and this is from a cover of Fantastic Four, and I don't remember the issue number, but John Byrne did an issue called "The Trial of Reed Richards." Early in his run, there had been a story where Galactus came to Earth, and of course, was going to eat the planet, and the Fantastic Four, the Avengers fought him, and they were able to basically defeat him because he was very low in power. His power was kind of depleted, and they got Galactus to swear not to eat Earth, and then he left. And then a couple of years later, there was this follow up issue where a bunch of alien civilizations came to Earth basically to put Reed Richards on trial because their worlds had subsequently been eaten by Galactus. And of course, they blamed Reed because he had saved Galactus's life. Galactus had actually been dying, and Reed had actually worked to allow him to live. And it was an interesting story, and that's what this cover is from. What else we got here? Batman and Hellboy. Let's see. And I don't recognize what cover this Hellboy comes from. Stop Hellboy! This is the only thing that can destroy him. The night Batman sold us. So I don't know. Again, it would be an interesting team up, but I'm trying to think if there was an actual Batman Hellboy. I think there might have been at some point because I think I think Hellboy. I know Batman did some team ups with some Dark Horse characters, and Hellboy was a Dark Horse character. There might have actually been one at some point. Batman and Detective Chimp. Uh, okay, so this is a fun one. I'm one of those comic book readers. I love stories with apes in them. It's kind of a trope, talking apes and whatnot. But I kind of dig them myself. Anyway, so Detective Chimp and Batman. So this Detective Chimp image, this comes. I think this is from a cover of Animal Man. Actually, I believe that's Brian Boland on the artwork on Detective Chimp. Now the Batman. This is from back in the 90s, late 90s. There was this kind of crossover event they did in all the Justice League related annuals one year called JL Ape, where basically all the members of the Justice League got turned into apes. And this is actually from the Batman annual from that year. And then the Ultra Human, I'm trying to think where this image of Ultra Humanite came from. I think this is from a cover of Infinity Incorporated from the early 80s, but I'm not sure. Okay, Brave and the Bold, Batman and four famous co-stars. Red Star, Superman Red Sun, Crimson Dynamo, Colossus. Bat in the USSR. Okay, so it's Batman teaming up with a bunch of Russian characters. Let's see. And so Red Star, of course, Red Star was introduced in the Teen Titans in the late 60s, I think. And he's became a recurring character. He even joined the Titans at one point, I think, like in the late 80s for a little while. Crimson Dynamo, of course, is a longtime Iron Man enemy. And Superman Red Sun, of course, from that one Elseworld story back in the 90s that's pretty popular. And then, of course, Colossus is an X-Man character. That's definitely a Dave Cockrum Colossus there. Dave Cockrum being the artist who originally created the design for Colossus, as well as Storm and Nightcrawler. Okay, let's see what else. Batman and Mr. Terrific. The world's smartest detective versus the world's smartest man. Defeat in dual dimensions. Okay, so it's both Mr. Terrifics. It's like the modern one and then the Golden Age versions. Oh, I really think, there have been a lot of, there's been a lot of complaints about all the race and gender swapping of characters in films and whatnot, and certainly in comics as well. But I do think it can work sometimes. And I actually think what DJ Ronnie G. Hey, hello, DJ Ronnie G. Thanks for stopping by. American Iron Man. Were you talking about? I don't know. Were you talking about Crimson Dynamo? Okay, so, but I actually think that the race swapping of Mister Terrific was actually a pretty good idea by Jeff Johns. He's the one who originally did it in JSA back in the like right at the end of the 90s, and it was a Mr. Terrific was a character that was basically um, basically defunct. He had been around briefly in the Golden Age, and then he hadn't been used really since the Golden Age. Now, in the 70s, they did a brief storyline involving him in one of their Justice League JSA crossovers, but the story was basically about them solving his murder. Basically, he was killed, and so it was not really much to him being in it. And then they didn't use him again, so the character was basically a character no one was making use of. And so I thought it was a good move to take that character and actually race swap him. I thought it worked really well. I like the modern version of Mr. Terrific Michael Holt. And honestly, Mr. Terrific was always kind of a cheesy character. And I think you could probably make an argument that making the guy black is probably the only way you could make Mr. Terrific seem cool. I think you could probably make an argument like that. And what else we got here? Batman and Ms. Marvel. Okay, so this is a Ms. Marvel cover with Batman. That's a Jim Aparo Batman swinging. I forget which issue of Ms. Marvel this is, but this is I think that might be Gil Kane. I think that might be Gil Kane art. That's definitely Bill Kane or Gil Kane doing Ms. Marvel, I think. And let's see what else we got. Okay, Batman and Nick Fury. Nick Fury, Shield. This is Nick Fury of Shield, and the Batcave is mine. So Nick Fury's like infiltrated the Batcave. That's fun. So that would definitely be an interesting meeting between the two of them. This is Gary Frank, or maybe no, that's Dale Keown. That's Dale Keown doing Nick Fury. That would be a fun one. Okay, so I'm at 8, so I think I'll probably go ahead and wrap it up here, and I'll continue this in the next live stream I do. I'll probably do one on Saturday, even though it's going to be Christmas Eve, but I figure why not? I'll probably have some spare time to do it. I do want to thank those of you who stopped by. And again, I want to thank those who will watch on the rewatch afterwards. And I'll go ahead and sign off here. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it.